The beginning. On the day of May the 2nd, 1933, an elderly couple was driving beside a loch, the local term for lake, in Scotland. It was a bright, clear, sunny day, and visibility was high as the couple's car rounded the wide corner and the expansive body of water became clear. However, despite the beautiful weather, the couple quickly noticed what appeared to be a large, possibly dangerous animal plunging in and out of the water. Its elongated neck appeared to be sporadically going into the water, creating a large series of splashes on the surface. After being unsuccessful in identifying the creature, the couple decided it would be a good idea to call the police and notify them that the possibly dangerous animal was in the proximity. After all, the loch was very popular with both locals and tourists who enjoyed boating, fishing, and swimming in the dark waters. They didn't want any person falling victim to a possible attack. Little did they know, this one phone call would take an old myth and elevate it to the height of media sensation that has lasted almost 100 years. This can be labeled as the inciting incident that launched the worldwide recognition of the Loch Ness Monster. Directly following this consequential sighting, the centuries-old legend of a water monster inhabiting the loch was reignited, and many of the locals began to go out looking for the creature. A local circus in the area at the time posted a reward of £20,000 to whoever could capture the creature. This, in conjunction with the excitement of the town, began a wave of hysteria that gripped both the country and the world. What exactly was this massive creature that this couple claimed to see? In the following months and years, dozens, if not hundreds, of reports began to flow into local news. The modern incarnation of the creature was eventually developed amidst the chaotic pouring in of supposed sightings. A humpbacked aquatic beast with flippers and a relatively extensive neck. And according to some sightings, a prominent tail as well. On April 21, 1934, an image was released in the paper that changed everything. Though today we now know the picture to unfortunately be a hoax, there is no denying that it has seared itself into the minds of the public. The entire world was amazed and enthralled by the monster. Citizens were now taking the legend much more seriously than ever before, and it was inevitable that sooner or later, someone would claim that they had the smoking gun that proved beyond a reasonable doubt that this surreal animal really was in the loch's waters. Most convincing evidence. The Rines Photos. Clear and undeniable evidence of the monster's existence. This claim was attached to the efforts of a man named Robert Rines and his group of scholars from the Academy of Applied Sciences. On August 8, 1972, the team actually managed to capture a small number of distinct images of what appeared to be parts of a large reptile-like creature at the bottom of the loch. Rines, being an accomplished American inventor, musician, and lawyer, had designed a plan to photograph the large beast that had apparently paid off. By connecting motion-sensitive lenses to rigs underwater and utilizing sonar to be able to see when a larger animal was supposedly coming within the camera's view, the crew would be able to create a simplistic version of timestamps, connecting large readings to photographs that would automatically be taken by the motion-sensitive cameras. And after developing the photos that were taken in conjunction with the most promising sonar readings, this is what was captured. Unfortunately, what Rines and his crew originally believed to depict the top of the head of the creature was actually discovered to be fungi, barnacles, and other residue on an obscure rocky outcrop. The second image had a similar fate. The image supposedly showing the body and elongated neck of the creature was debated over, and many simply believed the image was too blurry to be able to be sure of what was captured. Some believed the image to actually be a negative, the shadows being a rocky cliffside and the quote-unquote body of the animal being the illuminated surface of the water above. After all, the cameras used in the project were found to have been gradually moved and rotated by the swaying waters of the loch. Or perhaps it was a reflection off of the boat's chain and anchor, which may have accidentally passed near the lens. The unsurety and lack of definition ultimately led to the photo being cast aside. However, the same cannot be said of the final image. Before taking a closer look at the image itself and its reception, it is crucial to understand the process that these photos undertook in being developed, and the man who took them. The project lead, Robert Rines, was a very accomplished and respectable individual. He held many patents and awards because of his many successful ventures in the fields of both technology and natural sciences. As previously mentioned, he was successful as a musician, inventor, and lawyer. He founded multiple scientific and educational institutions, and was known to be regularly seen lecturing at Harvard University. The man was nothing if not accomplished and honorable. In truth, he had everything to lose if his photographs were found to be forgeries or hoaxes. After retrieving the cameras, Rines sent the photos off to be developed by Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, otherwise known as JPL. According to him, he sent the photos to JPL without giving any indication of what they were or what they were supposed to depict. In fact, Rines himself claimed that even he wasn't sure if he had caught anything worthwhile. He took no part in the development or enhancement of the photos, and claims that he received them just as they were printed, being as surprised at the result as everyone else. Clearly, no malicious intent was apparent, and neither Rines nor his crew had attempted to deceive anyone. All that being said, let's now take a look at the photo itself. Unlike the other photos, it is immediately clear what was supposedly captured: the flipper of the monster itself. At first, those trying to debunk the photo tried to do so on the basis of it being a known animal. Seals, sea lions, or sturgeon were suggested to be the culprits. However, after only a quick comparison, it becomes very clear to the most casual of observers that the flipper photograph was indeed very different in size, texture, proportion, and shape than any of those suggested. Next, this photo and all of the others were said to be debunked on the basis of the sonar readings being misread. The crew supposedly reading the axes of the sonar chart in reverse. In other words, skeptics believed that the chart had been misinterpreted and no large anomalies were ever detected. Therefore, the picture, no matter what it depicted, could not be the monster because it must have been too small. However, this point is easily dismissed. The skeptics are referring to the notes left by the crew on the sonar charts of the incident, very clearly showing two large amorphous blobs on the readings. Of course, these would be what the team attributed to the creature that was caught. The skeptics claim that the size of the creature was gauged by the crew using the vertical axes, which denotes time, meaning that the longer the object, the longer it was detected, not referring to the actual size of the object. However, by simply reading the chart and the notes of the crew recited, it is clear that there was no such mistake. The objects recorded by the sonar, according to the horizontal axes, referring to size, show a length of at least 30 feet. Just as the crewmate Simrad denotes in the side margin, quote, about 30 feet long, end quote. Of course, the striking vertical height of the lines is apparent, but if it was showing the size of the object, given that they take up more than half of the page, which covers a range of about 150 feet, it's clear that the crew would have claimed that the anomaly was closer to 70 feet in length, which, of course, they did not. I also find it ironic that casual skeptics claim that such a well-educated and accomplished group of scholars from a prestigious institution made such a blatant and mindless error in reading a rather simplistic chart. Regardless, their claim didn't even attempt to explain what exactly was captured in the photo. which, regardless of the sonar readings, was known to have been authentically captured by the motion-sensitive lenses when a 30-foot anomaly was passing by. Finally, there was one last claim made against the photo. It was too blurry. Now, while this may at first sound ridiculous, those making this argument were actually referring to the original version of the image, before it was processed and developed by JPL. To be completely fair, it's obvious that this is definitely the strongest point made against the image. In the original, it's almost impossible to see anything, let alone the flipper of a supposed sea monster. While this may at first seem damning, let's take a look at the process that JPL took the photos through in order to arrive at their final version of the image. It may surprise many to know, but photo editing has been around for essentially as long as photos themselves have existed. Editing lighting, contours, or clarity have been a basic practice of photography since its inception. That being the case, the first thing that these photos likely underwent was a lighting change. In other words, adjusting the levels, brightness, exposure, and contours of the image, simply making bright areas brighter and dark areas darker, most of which can be done automatically in only a few moments with tools and photo editors today. In fact, for your convenience, I've recreated what the photo may have looked like during each stage of its development. For the first stage, beginning with the original image and simply changing the lighting, this was the result. Instantly, there has been a vast improvement. The photo has gone from an ambiguous nothing to a possibly something, with only a few minor changes. The shape of the flipper and edge of the body become fairly apparent. However, the process of enhancing the photograph would still not have been complete at this point. Following this crucial step would likely have been another simple process, sharpening the image and recoloring it for newsprint. In order to simulate this, I simply applied an automated noise reduction filter over the entire picture, increased the contrast, and applied a general sharpening tool to the image as a whole. Then, of course, I removed all color. Essentially, all that was done to the image was an automated process completed within moments. The entire enhancement process took me less than 10 minutes to go from the original image to the final product. And when comparing my version of the image to others that were actually printed in the papers of the time, ironically, I'd say that my version may appear even more clear than theirs. Despite that being the case, those that read those papers and saw the images believed that even those versions of the pictures clearly held the flipper of the beast within the loch. Adding on to this, photo retouching was also a common practice at the time. This is likely where the relatively clear and defined versions of the images come from, though the process was commonplace at the time in order to produce the highest quality content possible, and was utilized in countless reputable news outlets. It was a process meant to enhance and clarify, not be dishonest and deceive. With all of this being said, it is completely understandable to view the final image beside the original and see how one would come to the conclusion that the entire thing must be nonsense. However, after taking one through the process of developing the original image, I hope that it has been made clear that no matter if the image truly shows the flipper of the monster or not, it was achieved by an honest and impartial process. The Rines photographs should in no way be refuted on the grounds of the image's lacking authenticity. The Zuiyo Maru Carcass. It was April 25th, 1977. The weather was clear and sunny off of the coast of Christchurch, New Zealand, and the Japanese fishing vessel named the Zuiyo Maru was trawling for mackerel about 30 miles east of the shoreline. At the time, everything was routine. There was no indication of anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, the ship swayed, and the net began to indicate that something large had been caught. Definitely not the typical school of mackerel. The net was hoisted back into the ship, and it was immediately clear that something out of the ordinary had been captured. The crew immediately began to speculate about the identity of the carcass. many believing that they had just netted an undiscovered species of some sort. After realizing that they would not be able to keep the carcass on board due to both its horrible smell and the possibility that it would spoil the rest of their catch, the 39-year-old captain aboard the vessel, by the name of Michihiko Yano, began to take a much closer look at the body in order to internalize as many details about it as possible. After viewing the corpse up close, Yano collected a number of small tissue samples and even constructed a diagram detailing the number of bones and lengths of various parts of the creature's body, producing a critical document that is referenced by researchers to this day. After the crew's examination was finished, and several photographs had been taken, the carcass was hung overboard and dropped back into the sea, where it has remained ever since. Following the incident, the samples of the creature were sent to biochemical laboratories in Japan for testing, and, to the shock of many, the chemical makeup of the creature appeared to be similar to that of a known species. Basking sharks were seemingly the culprit. In most cases, the counts of the amino acids differing only slightly from the samples of known basking sharks. And, as some scientists posited, even the unusual appearance of the carcass could be explained by a basking shark's irregular pattern of decomposition, possibly losing its lower jaw and dorsal fin to appear more similar to what was seen in the images from the decks of the ship. So, that's it, right? Problem solved? Well, not exactly. Though the answers seemed to be sufficient for some, for others, including some of the crew who recovered the carcass, it ignored some blatant facts. For starters, basking sharks were known to be a rare catch in the area that was being fished. Never had the ship caught or seen anything resembling one. Not to mention the length of the carcass, 33 feet. Had it truly been a basking shark missing parts of its lower body, as the theory posits, would have made it more than 40 feet long. This magnificent size would be the largest specimen of the species ever observed, let alone in an area where the species is essentially non-existent today. In addition to this, several physical aspects of the body also did not align with known basking shark species. Similar to marine mammals, the body was covered in small, discolored, hair-like fibers that are not usually noticed on dead or decomposing sharks. Then, there were clear spike-like protrusions from the spine of the animal, not a known attribute of any known shark species. And finally, despite using Yano's detailed measurements to insinuate that other pieces of the corpse conform to a basking shark, the biologists conveniently insist that Yano must have made mistakes when detailing other parts of the animal. The crew claimed the presence of matching upper anterior fins, a small skull with differentiating eye and nasal cavities, and a larger than average rib cage. According to proponents of the basking shark theory, all those observations simply must have been misidentifications. The biologists claim that the crew must have miscounted the fins, mismeasured the rib cage, and even failed to notice that the skull was apparently broken in half, as it all must have been if the animal was truly a basking shark. Keeping in mind, if even one of those aspects were actually true, a basking shark would no longer be a possible explanation. According to an online journal critiquing the basking shark hypothesis, quote, Professor Kazuya, Tokyo University, observed that if it were a shark, the spine would be smaller. Furthermore, the neck is too long, and the small size of the examined head does not fit the morphological features of a shark. Obata and Tomoto record that another biologist was initially inclined to accept the shark identification. However, when he compared the Zuiyo Maru photographs with a large specimen of a basking shark he had recently seen, he stated the animal in question was not a basking shark. End quote. All of this is not to say that this animal could not have been what the biologists claim. After all, although not a perfect match, the chemicals in the samples of the animal seem to point in that general direction. I simply hope that I've made it clear that no matter what a panel of numbers may say, I hope that it does not completely discredit one's visual perception and common sense. This animal's identity, despite what others may claim, is by no means certain. And if it wasn't a basking shark, then what was it? The Loch Foyle sighting. On April 15, 2013, a very strange video was uploaded to the internet. Uploaded by a relatively new short film YouTube channel, the description of the video claims that while filming a new movie for their channel by the name of Fishing with David Lynch, the friend group and one bystander actually caught sight of a large unidentified animal quickly passing through the area.
What is it? What is that? See it? Is that a hair? Look at the size of it. It's massive.
The lake where the friends were was named Loch Foyle in Ireland, not far at all from Loch Ness. The video was scrutinized, and the vast majority of the population believed that the footage was clearly authentic, with the waters in the loch at that time of year being much too cold and wavy for any person to personally propel or maneuver a homemade prop through. The footage was even featured in several news outlets. The question was now, what exactly was captured? Immediately, of course, the only creature known to even vaguely resemble the animal in the footage would be some form of whale. However, as the comments of the video blatantly discuss, the creature in the video has several observable qualities that would distinguish it from the vast majority of whale species. As the observer on the side states, quote, "It's got no fin," end quote. Whale species surface to breathe, exposing both a blowhole and dorsal fin of some form, neither of which were apparent on this animal. In addition to this, both parties of people in the footage, both the friends on the boat in the foreground and the bystander in the background, were local fishermen of the area. Neither party believed the animal to be a whale, even with the bystander appearing to be only a handful of feet away from the creature. Ironically, the best explanation that could be found for the sighting was a comment on the video itself: a North Atlantic right whale. These specific types of whales have no dorsal fin and come close to the surface with a breaching hump in order to feed on the smaller organisms at the top of the water column. The animal indeed does look similar to what was sighted. However, one will see that this argument does not hold well against the facts. The hump in the original sighting is of an ovular, oblong shape, very different from that of a more triangular and pointed right whale's snout. In addition to this, there is very clearly a mouth and blowhole seen in the right whale footage. The cameraman clearly able to pick up the fact that the animal was feeding with its mouth wide open at the surface, with both its fiber-like teeth and hollow throat visible to the naked eye. The bystander close to the creature in the footage of the sighting saw no such features, nor were they apparent in the footage. Another point is the speed of the animal. Most right whales swim slow and leisurely, especially when feeding. However, one thing of note in the footage is just how fast the animal is, leaving a large and noticeable wake in the water from both its speed and massive frame. Then, the body of the creature itself. One of the most notable features of the right whale is the white colorization on the edges of their bodies, particularly on their snouts that will surface when feeding. This is due to the bacteria, barnacles, and other microbes that will accumulate over time after abrasions from feeding or conflicts. They only grow and become more apparent over time, being most visible in the oldest and largest specimens. However, it's clear that in this footage, the creature lacks those markings, despite the fact that its enormous size would indicate a specimen of significant age. Finally, as the strongest point against the right whale theory, the species does not even live in the area of the sighting. Never before or after have such animals been reported to be in Loch Foyle waters. In fact, though it is unfortunate, The right whale species is severely endangered, with less than an estimated 350 individuals left on the planet. With their population already being so low, the fact that it was not a species in the area, the point that it had several distinct physical differences, and lastly that even the experienced fishermen right beside it could not identify it, I hope that it's clear that this animal was definitely not any species that has been proposed by skeptics. And when looking at recreations of some of the most famous sightings of Nessie, the similarities are immediately clear. If Nessie is real, what is she? There's been decades of speculation on what the animal in the loch's waters truly is. Some have proposed an eel or even slug-like specimen due to the apparent elongated and smoothened body. Some have claimed the monster had patches of hair-like fibers and was capable of locomotion on land, making it more of a marine mammal. And most famously, some have posited that the animal is some form of reptile due to its strange, discolored, and textured skin. Personally, I lean more towards the latter two options, Nessie being either some form of enlarged and specialized marine mammal or an unidentified reptile. It becomes apparent when looking at other similar mammals who inhabit bodies of water that appearances can be quite deceiving. After all, take a look at these photos of recently discovered river dolphins from Central America. From the right distance and angle, one could easily struggle to realize that these foreign forms in the dark waters were actually that of known animals. Similarly with sea lions, which are known to have often been the cause of Loch Ness Monster sightings. Their speed and form with a slightly lengthened neck can easily give the general appearance of what proponents of the monster claim to view. It is too often that the theory of the monster being a still-living plesiosaur is brought into the spotlight. More often than not, witnesses are just using the plesiosaur as a reference to show what the animal vaguely resembled, not positing that the creature in question was a remnant of the species. In the same vein that an eyewitness could claim that a platypus looked like a beaver. They are clearly not saying that it was a beaver, only that it had several qualities that were reminiscent of one. In fact, there have been countless species that are known to inhabit the world today that look like prehistoric organisms that would be ripped straight from legends or the days of the dinosaurs. It is not impossible that Nessie is simply one of these. For instance, take a look at these turtle and tortoise species. It is not uncommon for a description of the monster, especially with its prominent hardened humpback, to be likened to that of some form of sea turtle. In fact, when looking at other species of long-necked turtles, the general shape of the animal described by witnesses, that of a long-necked reptile with a noticeable bony back, is definitely there. Imagine, if you will, that there was simply a large undiscovered species of long-necked sea turtles. Both characteristics already being observed in several known species. Far from impossible, the monster could easily be something such as this. Adding on to this, please also consider the plausibility of a large animal such as the one that is currently being considered living in Loch Ness. Many skeptics claim that the lake itself lacks the resources to support even a small population of such creatures. This is simply untrue. According to several well-funded and well-founded studies on the topic from various sources and institutions, supporting a small population of about 10 to 20 individuals is completely plausible when considering both the nutrients and space provided in the waters. However, to be completely honest, I've always found it strange that skeptics seem to believe that the monster is permanently bound within the lake, when it is clear that Loch Ness is currently connected to the North Sea. Perhaps the reason it is seen so unreliably is simply because the animal only frequents the location when certain conditions are not met in its original home grounds, being the open ocean. After all, large diadromous animals who are able to convert between salt and freshwater are well known in today's world. Ironically, modern studies of plesiosaur fossils show that they may have actually acclimated to freshwater systems. Lake monsters throughout the world's ponds and rivers could actually be similar species that came upstream from open waters. Conclusion. With all of this being said, I hope it is clear that the legend of the Loch Ness Monster is by no means simply based upon folklore and fairy tales. There have been multiple well-documented and substantiated events around the existence of such an animal. In both open oceans and the lake itself, sightings, bodies, and photographs have accumulated into what the world knows today, a worldwide phenomenon that has gripped the interest of millions. By exploring the possibilities of what is known to be possible, it can become known just how plausible it is that there truly is an unknown large something lurking in the waters of today's world. After all, there's a reason that we've ventured more into space than Earth's own waters. Truly, I hope you found this to be an interesting and thoughtful dive into the topic of Nessie and her existence. And if you're ever visiting Scotland, don't swim in the deep water.